Jim, what's up, man?
Man, you've been
All right.
practicing.
Yeah, I do what I can in this time. It's good to see you though.
Good to see you too, man.
How you been holding up? How are you and Lindsay doing?
We're doing okay. We're hanging in there, trying to adjust to this, new way of being. There's so many phrases everyone keeps throwing around, new reality and, all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying not to use all those hackneyed sayings right now. But we're doing okay. I would much rather be down in Heinz Hall playing rehearsals and concerts, but I also don't want the world to, be hit by this any harder than it has to, So
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. How are your folks doing?
they're okay. I'm obviously very worried about them because my dad and my stepmom are in their mid 80s. So and even though they take pretty good care of themselves, they are in their mid 80s. So we have family that is looking in on them, that taking care of them and stuff. And what's really sweet is I've had friends who live in New York who have offered to drive up there because they're about 90 miles from New York, and they've said I've had friends just without me even asking, just saying, well, if you get in a bind and you need us to just drop something on their doorstep, we're happy to do that. So it's kind of cool to see the humanity that's coming out of all this. And but yeah, I'm very worried about my dad and my stepmom for sure, because they're in good health, but I don't know if they could survive something like this. So
Yeah.
it's hard to believe, but my dad is he's before this happened, he was swimming an hour every day, so he was in pretty good shape. And but I've called him numerous times. He's doing okay,
Oh, that's great.
and then
My
Lindsay's
folks
folks
are
are doing okay too. So
Yeah, my folks are the same way. They're tough old birds, but you know,
yeah,
it's they're also obstinate and stubborn. So I'm trying my best to
indeed.
keep them at home.
Exactly, exactly.
uh, well, what like I mean, here we are. We're cooped up at home, but what concerts were you looking most forward to at Heinz Hall that now have been canceled for the sake of obviously the city's health and everyone
Sure.
everyone not getting infected?
Well, the one that's really standing out is the Beethoven Missa Solemnis, because I've never played that piece. I've always missed playing it. Like in the orchestras I've been in, they had played it either right before I got there or right after I left, and I've never played it. And it's just this great piece, has incredibly rewarding trombone parts. It was going to be with Manfred. I was really, really looking forward to that. I'm hoping that will get rescheduled. But that's definitely the one that's the standout to me that I'm really bummed to miss. So,
Yeah, I was really looking forward to Petrushka, in which I
oh
think
yeah.
I believe it was this week,
Hmm.
and then in a couple of weeks the concert with Anne Sophie Mutter, who I don't know if you know this, but she was,
She has it.
yeah, oh man, that made my heart kind of like freeze for a second when I heard that. But I think
Has that definitely been canceled?
I'm not sure yet. I can't remember what week that is. Maybe it hasn't been, but
Well, because if that concert, I didn't know that if that's been officially canceled yet. I've been holding out hope because it's in June, in mid June, because that's also the John Williams special.
that's
And
right. That's right. Yeah. So no, actually, that hasn't been canceled yet.
yeah,
And
I
hopefully
mean,
everything, we'll hope against hope that everything returns to normal before then. But uh,
well, I'm hopeful, but I'm preparing for the reality that that's. Especially with John Williams, he's also in his mid 80s. He's
yeah.
not. If I were him, I would be, not wanting to travel either. So
Well, like, I mean, we're sitting here practicing at home, all of us,
yeah,
and it's funny because some of my instruments are at the hall
right,
because I live a 10-15 minute walk from the hall. So a lot of my
right.
larger instruments like marimba and vibraphone, I keep at the hall. So I've got other stuff to practice, obviously, but you know, um, to me, it's sort of like it makes practicing in this situation makes me a lot better, of course, because practicing always does. But man, I
Sure.
would I would way rather be at Heinz Hall,
Oh,
concerts, seeing our audience and patrons.
yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, the practicing, I'm doing, I haven't missed a day since we stopped. Like I haven't, I've made that a rule that I'm not going to miss a day because, you know, I mean, this can be said about any kind of concert, but it's, audition or anything kind of like that. But you don't prepare for a concert the week before, or you don't prepare for an audition the week before.
Yeah,
So it's like you've won an audition 6 months before it happens,
yeah,
and same with playing at the level that the PSO plays at. Those preparations, like, I'm looking down the road 6 months from now. I want, for whenever we're back, I want to be ready to go, and I'm not going to just let that fall by the wayside. Now, the plus side is that when I practice now, I can just really take my time and not have to fit it into any select time. Like I can really stretch things out. If I feel like I need to work on some part of my playing a little longer, I can, or take little breaks, I can. I'm not pressed into like, oh, I got to be ready for rehearsal. But, in the immortal words of our colleague Craig Knox, there are no regular season games in the PSO. Every game's the playoffs. So, yeah. And it's like, so the same is true for playing in the orchestra. It's like, I can't really practice the same way as it feels to play in the orchestra, like it's a whole different experience. And so, no, I'd much rather, I mean, I'm trying to see the pluses of this time away, but, they certainly are not outweighed by the pluses of being back at work.
yeah, no kidding. So like, you know, so speaking of which, like practicing at home the way you would, play the concert. So, some people might not know, but your wife, Lindsay, is the CEO of Tripo, the Three Rivers
Hmm.
Young Persons Orchestra. So, have you worn out your welcome at home in terms of how often you practice, and are you making up for it with cooking or cleaning or something like that? How close are you to being kicked out of the house?
Oh, not at all. I mean, some might not realize that Lindsay is also a brass player. I mean, she's a French horn player, and she's no stranger to brass practicing, and so she knows what that takes and entails. And no, I mean, we're balancing it as best we can. I think she's working really hard to keep her students engaged, and I'm still teaching all my students and all my classes at Duquesne, you know, through Zoom. I never was really into online teaching. I always kind of stayed away from it because, I just prefer being in person. But now that we're forced to be in this way, I find that there's actually certain things that are kind of neat about it in terms of sharing content easily and quickly, like through the screen sharing stuff on Zoom and all that, but we're staying engaged with our students as best we can. But no, I mean, I think we're actually striking a good balance, Lindsay and I, as far as like not killing each other.
Lindsay's also a very accomplished pianist as well, which
Hmm.
I've known you and Lindsay for 10 years now. And just a couple of weeks ago, before the world turned upside down, that was the first time I'd ever seen her play piano. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. She's played because her late mother was a concert pianist at first, and then she became an opera singer. And her mom, passed away about 10 years ago now, or no, it's been longer than that. It was when I never actually met her. Like when she passed away right after we met, and but her mom was a very successful opera singer, sang at the Met and the City Opera, and very successful at that. But she was a concert pianist at first, and I think that's kind of what got into Lindsay's blood as far as wanting to play piano. And I don't know if she had a whole lot of formal training, but she can play. Oh yeah,
oh yeah.
she definitely can play. Hmm.
Well, so you speaking of teaching and using our technology, we've all been forced, for better or worse, to use this technology. And I've seen on Facebook and around the internet a bunch of videos of various, people recording themselves and then splicing it together,
Sure.
which all of us use to a certain degree, it's sort of in our everyday practice and performance and even teaching. But, you're you've been doing this for a long time. You're kind of an OG in that regard.
Yeah, I'm a little ahead of the curve on this.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny to see the rest of the world, coming around to what you've been doing, laying down a whole bunch of tracks, and then
Yeah, my inbox has been pretty full lately. Let's just put it that way.
well, so what when you were doing this, what prompted you to start this type of project?
Well, it actually started a long time ago when I was home for summer vacation. From I went to Curtis for my undergrad. When I was home from Curtis in the summers, I remember one day, that was back. So that would be the early '90s. My dad had a little boom box that had 2 tape decks on it, and I thought maybe I could take an orchestral excerpt that has 3 parts and record all the parts and kind of link them together. So what I would do is I'd play the one part on one tape deck, then record the other, and then it would basically record both parts. Then I'd play that one and then record on the other deck, and so just kind of zigzagging back and forth. But what was funny was that because it was a tape deck and it was not digital technology, the motor in the tape deck was actually a teeny bit slow, so proportionally it would start to get more and more flat as it would go, but I would tune with it. Yeah. So I first started doing it back then, but then it went dormant for many, many years until it was about, 2012 was when, when you get to a certain point in your career and you're trying to get in shape for the season, it gets a little boring to pull out the old etude books and do all that kind of stuff. So I was looking for kind of a more fun way to get in shape for the season. So over the years, I had done all these arrangements for trombone choir. For those that don't know, trombone choir is basically like 8 parts or more of a group of trombones, like tenor, alto, bass trombones, and in some cases contrabass and soprano if you're a nut job like me.
I believe a group of trombonists is called a terror.
Yeah. Yeah, it's against most fire codes. So I was, I had all these arrangements I had done over the years of, like we mentioned John Williams earlier. I'm a huge John Williams fan, just in case those of you are wondering, just want to make sure. But yeah, when I was a kid, my dad took me to see Empire Strikes Back, and I was hooked from that point on his music. And I've had the good fortune to work with him on many occasions throughout the years. And but I had these arrangements, these movie arrangements I'd done for trombone choir. And so I took one of them, this Superman march, and I just decided, what if I recorded all the parts myself? Like, that would be kind of a fun way to get in shape, do it from the first trombone part all the way down to the, lowest bass trombone part, like 12 parts or something. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just had a mic and I used this Audacity software, this free software, and I just started messing around with it and started playing all this different stuff. And I put it on this site called SoundCloud. And SoundCloud is kind of like a YouTube for music, and it absolutely blew up. I didn't anticipate. I thought, maybe 10 trombone players would listen to it and think it was cool or whatever. Well, as I checked earlier today, my SoundCloud is closing in on 1 million listens.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's like 930,000 listens or something like that. Yeah. And it's absolutely insane, and it has opened up all these avenues now that all these schools have asked me to come and do these arrangements at the school and teach this technology and teach how to do this kind of thing and create this really great student experience. And right before everything kind of came to a halt, I went to the University of North Texas in February, and that was my 52nd school in 6 years that I've been to.
Wow, in 6 years. Man, that's
6
incredible.
years. Yeah. So, it's really become this huge thing. And so when all of a sudden the world got shut in and needed to find outlets to play and sort of doing overdubbing, I mean, there has not been a day that has gone by since the quarantining started and social distancing started that there has not been a single day that I haven't gotten at least a couple of texts or emails or, like just the other day I did a FaceTime call with Joe Alessi, the principal trombone of the New York Phil. We're friends, but he called me and was like, "Hey, I got some questions about how to do this. Can you, like,
Right.
so I'm the lightning rod for this. People I haven't heard from in like a decade are calling me saying, "Yeah, that thing you always talked about, earlier.
Right.
Can you teach me how to do that now?" And so, it's but I've continued to do them over the years. I mean, obviously I'm doing them now, and it's really a lot of fun.
Now more than ever, I presume, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot more time.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not a substitute for playing in a concert, though. I mean, it's a incredibly good supplement. Like, that's what would make it so fun for me is when I'd work on one of these recordings. It'd be like really great for your playing because you're constantly you're constantly listening back, adjusting your intonation, your rhythm and style, and just playing things back over and over. And it's so fun because you're practicing, but at the end you have this like product that you can share, this,
Right.
you can like, check this out, and one of the funny side effects is when I go to these schools, no one ever says this isn't playable because I can be like, "Oh yeah, let me show you this recording I made where I played all the parts." It's hard. I will grant them that it's not easy, but when I do my arrangements and my recordings, I'm not really interested in making it easy. I'm interested in making it sound good.
Right.
And so yeah, it's become this huge thing now. But it always fed into the orchestra.
Well, you started with mostly John Williams stuff, or that's sort of the bulk of what you're doing, the bread and butter. And what drew you to John Williams and specifically his works?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when I was a kid, my dad took us to see my brother and I. He took my brother and I to see Empire Strikes Back, and so I was hooked right then on his music. And I just over the years I've always loved his scores and how different some of them are from one another. And if you were to listen to Empire Strikes Back versus Catch Me If You Can versus JFK versus Lincoln, they all sound like different composers, and I've always enjoyed that variety. And so I just started there. I mean, we're in a major Grammy-winning orchestra, and we play his music as much as probably the only orchestras that play his music more than us is maybe like the Boston Pops and the LA Philharmonic. And I never can get enough. I never could get enough. I mean, if we played a John Williams concert once a month, I still would want more. And so that's why,
I'm with you. His percussion parts are always really challenging as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's I both when we get a new film score in and we're dividing up the parts and I'm looking at stuff, I'm always equal parts like filled with anxiety and excitement, right? Because I know that I'm going to spend the next 3 months practicing this one particular vibraphone or xylophone lick or the whole thing, and but knowing that it's going to be really cool when it pays off in the end. So, well,
isn't his brother a percussionist? I think his brother's like a timpanist or something.
I believe Don Williams is his brother. Yeah, and he played timpani on a lot of stuff. So, have you ever been in contact with John Williams about this? I think you have, but I don't know, right?
Well, yeah, I mean we should probably back up a little bit. Like I was a big fan of his music for years and years, and then when I moved to Boston to do my master's degree at New England Conservatory, that's when I first got to play with him. And because my teacher at the time was Norman Bolter's retired second trombone player of the Boston Symphony and principal trombone of the Boston Pops for many years, and I watched him on TV with John Williams, on those PBS broadcasts of the Boston Pops, and Norman's an incredible player and teacher. A lot of his students refer to him as the Yoda of the trombone because he's like 5'6" and he wears like a size 6 shoe, and he's like, but he can play the trombone like you wouldn't believe. I mean, the first time I met him, he saw the look on my face and he was like, "You thought I'd be bigger, didn't you?" But
not.
What's that?
Size matters not.
That's right. That's right. Staying on brand. I like that. Yeah. But he would have this, tradition when he was teaching of giving his students a chance to play in the Boston Pops. And sometimes they would only play once or twice, but he wanted to give people a chance to sort of get their feet wet with that. And so I ended up becoming a regular sub there when I lived in Boston for 5 years, but that was the first time I ever played with John Williams. Was that first year that I was a master student at New England Conservatory, and I remember the excitement I had because it was 1999, and that was the year that the Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out. And John came to Boston to do the concert suite premiere of the music from that score. Wow. And as a matter of fact, I have a little picture here.
Look at that.
That is backstage at Symphony Hall in Boston at that concert. That's from 1999. See, yeah, I even have the date right there. Yeah. So that was the first time I ever played with him. And this was the crazy part, was I played the concert, and it was so great. And I went up to Norman. I said, do you think he would be okay if I went and took a picture with him? He's just been a hero of mine for so long. And he said, yeah, just go ask the personnel manager. I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. And he did that. And I walked into that room, and he shook my hand, and he said, he said, "Oh, so nice to meet you. I'm so happy we can do this." And I was like, "You're happy? I'm the one who's happy," And you see the smile on his face, and he was like, the brass sounds so fabulous, and the trombones sound wonderful. You're doing a terrific job. And he was just so encouraging. And then that started. I started playing there regularly, and after a while he just started addressing me by name. He just started saying, "Hello, Jim," like in the hallway. Yeah. I'd see him and such, and and then the crazy part is, after I left Boston, I went to the Utah Symphony, and my first season in the Utah Symphony was the year of the Winter Olympics that happened in Salt Lake City,
right.
Which John wrote the music for the opening ceremonies with the Utah Symphony and the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. So he came to Utah, and we played together there, and he gave me a big hug and said, "Hello, so good to see you." But then I come to the PSO, and it was like my second year there. Our second year, it was like, I remember, that was the last time he's been here. And I saw him backstage, and he goes, "Jim, wait, you're here now?" and I said, "Yeah, it's part of the trombone witness protection program. They just move us from orchestra to orchestra, And he was very complimentary. He said, "Oh, well, congratulations on joining this fabulous orchestra. It's an incredible group of musicians." And because he's recorded here before we got here, he did an album with the PSO. Was that the mid '90s or something?
And Yo-Yo Ma, I believe, it won a Grammy.
Yeah. It was like one of those. It was a lot of his music, like arranged for cello or something. I can't remember the exact details, but I know he's recorded here, and But as far as him knowing about these overdub projects, the last time I played with him, I went back to Boston to play as an extra on one of his concerts with the Boston Pops, and I saw him backstage, and it had been a while. It had been 5-6 years or something. So I saw him backstage, and I walked up to him, and I was like, "Hi, John, do you remember me?" And he kind of looked sternly at me. He goes, "Of course I remember you, Jim. What are you talking about?" And he was like, "How are you? How are things in Pittsburgh?" And I was like, "Oh, they're going well." And I said, "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about this little side project I've been doing. I've actually been taking some of your scores and arranging them for trombone ensemble, trombone choir, and like recording all the parts myself, like as a fun side project. And he looked at me and goes, "Oh, that's really interesting. How many parts are we talking? Like 4 or 5 parts?" And I said, "Well, actually, in some cases, it's like 18, 19 parts." And he like, his eyes got wide and he goes, "I would really like to hear some of that." So I said, "Okay, well, when I have one that is ready to go, I'll send it to you. I'll find one. I'll send one to you." Right. So I sent him a recording of the original version of Superman that I did, and I'll play you just a little example of it. So I sent him that, and that was the summer. That was the summer of 2015 because he was scoring the Force Awakens, the episode 7, Star Wars Episode 7, yeah. And he clearly was neck deep in scoring that and recording that. Well, he took the time after I sent it to him, and 2 weeks later, I got this letter. Handwritten letter from him, hand addressed even.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and so congratulating me and saying how wonderful it was, and I mean, that's the kind of guy he is, and so it was really, really incredible. And so I ended up going on to make this whole Star Wars album of stuff that of his music that I arranged and recorded, and it's called A Fall from Light to Dark. Because I had to be careful about Star Wars copyright infringement and such. I had to name
exactly.
it. I was perfectly legally capable of recording them and releasing them, but I had to be careful about any art or title or trademark stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I contacted them to see it, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't do that." So, but that's fine. People know what it is.
Well, so when you normally, in a concert, right? When we do a concert of John Williams music, or even when we play the film, and we, the orchestra, play the soundtrack along with the film, there are normally 3, maybe 4 trombones total,
right?
A tuba, 3 or 4 trumpets, and anywhere from 4 to 6 horns. In say your average Star Wars part. But when you make these projects, you've got this huge instrumentation, right? And you do these all yourself. So how many trombones do you need for this type of project?
Well, I can show you one of the scores I did. I did on that album I mentioned. I did the Duel of the Fates, which is from episode 1, and it's like you said, typically for 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, 6 horns, 1 tuba. But my arrangement looks like this. And that is 19 parts.
Yeah. So instead of anywhere from a baker's dozen, brass parts, you put them, you've orchestrated them and put them all down for trombone or brass, which is
right. Like I try to play. I'm playing all the violin parts. I'm playing all the woodwind parts. I'm playing all the string parts in addition to all the brass parts. And it's all in there. And it's hard. I mean, it's a huge challenge. But like I said, I'm not interested in easy. I'm interested in sounding good.
Yeah, and one of my favorite. Speaking of which, one of my favorite parts in the Superman march is sort of during the interlude, when there's this, horn, which sounds wickedly hard. And it's funny because in the Superman one, the one that I most recently saw, Mark Houghton is just killing it. He sounds great, and you know, a
Yeah.
part that I would normally think belongs well in the mid range of the trumpet. You know, he just you know executes it with grace.
Hmm.
You know, I mean,
Hmm.
it's almost like throwing a javelin and just seeing it, you know, like
Yeah.
reach the you know the apogee of its arc. It's really cool. So. Um, and so, I mean, obviously, we can see some of the trombones behind. Oh, all right, hang on. Sorry, 1 second, Jim. Time's up. Well, Jim, how many? I see, you know, at least four trombones behind you, and it's funny because I'm this way with. I'm the same way with cymbals and snare drums. There's always a different tool for the job. But how many trombones do you have there, and are you in like your special trombone bunker, your bomb-proof trombone bunker?
Well, I mean, I have, let's see, I don't know if I can show you. Like there at the bottom, at the beginning is a soprano trombone, alto trombone. That's a small tenor trombone, and then my regular tenor, and that's a bass, and then the really tall one is a contrabass. And then next to the contrabass is my first professional grade instrument that I ever got. And then that last one is the first trombone I ever had. When it's a Yamaha student model. And then up on the top are just some bells, that different parts for different instruments. So I've got, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 functioning instruments with probably enough other spare parts to put together another one, you know.
Yeah.
And this is a room in our house, like right as you come in, but it's also on the other side of this wall is, I mean, like right across the room is the piano. But I actually only teach in this room, like when I have one-on-one lessons. Most of my recording and practicing actually happens, our living room and our kitchen are connected. And I experimented with different acoustics, and I found that was, if I record kind of off axis to the wall and have the mic about 12 feet in front of me, that got the best combination of carpeted and hard surfaces that isn't too harsh. Like I tried doing it in my basement, and concrete is just awful for brass. It just really makes the sound harsh, and I hated the way it sounded. So I just started trying different places until I found that. But this room is just where they all kind of live. It's my
Trophy room.
trombone arsenal, you know. yeah. It's I mean, but I got all the way through graduate school with one tenor trombone, and I didn't even own a secondary instrument, like an auxiliary instrument of any kind, until, you know, after I graduated. Like I didn't even play bass trombone until I got to the PSO, because part of my job in the PSO is not only am I the second trombone player, but I'm also the utility player. Right. So that basically means I play anything in the section. I mean, I played the alto trombone part on our Beethoven 5 recording. I played bass trombone on like several. I mean, like before Jeff D was hired, our current bass trombone player, after Murray Crew went out on disability, in that gap I was playing weeks a year on bass trombone. So, and I didn't even own a bass trombone when I came to Pittsburgh. That was part of the job. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get one and figure it out. And actually, Murray Crew was basically my first bass trombone teacher. We would sit on stage after rehearsals and just kind of play through stuff, and he'd give me ideas. I'd talk about, you know, because it is a different instrument. I mean, it looks the same, but it's a bigger bore, has a very different airstream to it, and very different demands, you know. So
well, and there's you know, you mentioned the alto part in Beethoven 5, which is also the first symphony to ever
first symphony to ever have trombones, and it's got the highest trombone part ever written in an orchestra piece,
which is that alto part, right? I mean, and that is
it's an audition excerpt,
right?
Yep.
Like that's a really tough part. So
I got the call to play that part. I was playing bass trombone that week, and it's a long story, but I got notified on Friday morning that weekend that they needed me to play alto trombone on that concert.
For
And it was
no less.
for recording.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's just say I spent most of that weekend on one butt cheek, if you know what I mean.
Well, so I imagine that the most of all the horns that you have behind you, I imagine that the most, the one that has the most sentimental value is your first one, right?
Well, no, actually,
All right.
it's this one. It's this instrument here, which is it's a Bach 42, Model 42. Right now, this instrument.
That was your first professional grade.
Right, my first professional instrument. And the story behind why that's the most sentimental instrument for me is sad. Is kind of a sad story. But it also informs. It's kind of an origin story in terms of
Staying on brand.
Yeah, exactly. When I was 15, or just before my 15th birthday, April, this time of year, April of my, just as I was about to turn 15, I was taking private lessons that year for the first time, like regularly. And I was studying with the second trombone player of the Hartford Symphony. We grew up in a suburb of Hartford called South Windsor, right? That's where my dad still lives, right? And so I was having these private lessons, and I was playing that little student model instrument that I showed you. And this teacher was like, no. After a few months, he said to my folks, look, he's totally outgrown this instrument. He needs something serious. He needs a real instrument. And he gave them some recommendations, and I went and tried some out, and I bought that. And my folks bought me that instrument. And I mean, you couldn't pry it out of my hands. I just played that thing all day long. I loved playing it. It was so much fun to have like a real professional instrument. And but what we didn't know, obviously, was that my mom was in pretty bad health, and it was very serious. We didn't realize how bad it was. And in July of that year, so only a few months after I had this instrument, she suffered a massive heart attack and died. And I was the one who had to call 911 and like have them come and try and revive her, and watch as this whole horror unfolded in front of me. And it was obviously incredibly difficult time for our family, and because not only was she was my mom and my dad's wife, but she and my dad ran a restaurant together. They were partners in this restaurant. So he not only lost his wife, but he lost his business partner. All of a sudden his life not only was tragically changed, with his wife passing, but he suddenly had all this extra responsibility running the restaurant, and we were all devastated. But music was such a big part of my life then. That flashpoint moment, basically, it's the moment that music stopped being something that I do and it became something that I am. Like I threw myself into music so much. I found it to be such a great, refuge and sanctuary, as it were, like from that difficult time. Like I could play, I played, the Pavane for a Dead Princess. I would play like that horn solo on trombone, and because I take really interesting note of that title. It's a Pavane for a Dead Princess, not a dead queen. So like somebody very young, and my mom was only 51. She was very young.
Wow.
And so not only did that make me, pursue music, but it also is why I take my health seriously too. It's very important for me to, keep my cholesterol below a certain level. I exercise regularly. In fact, about an hour before this interview, I went for a run, and it's interesting trying to run outside these days. It's like more of a zigzag, trying to stay away from people.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I'm on that one.
But running for me, I don't particularly enjoy running. I like the results, but running for me is kind of like, I remember my old colleague from the Utah Symphony, this trumpet player Nick Norton, used to say, "Yeah, running's running is like hitting your head against a wall. It feels really good when you stop, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I like, you know, I can't argue with the results, and you know, I want to have a nice, long, healthy life, and it also helps my playing. Obviously, having strong, you know, cardiovascular lung system, you know, like it you know, obviously makes playing the trombone a lot easier when you can breathe well. So,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Well, I think you know, I think when this is all over, hopefully sooner than later, you know, much like you know, music sort of you know pulls you out of a dark place in life. I think our role will be very similar. I think people will want to come together, and I mean, obviously now more than ever, people are enjoying uh, you know art and film and writing.
exactly.
You know,
Hmm.
it's because in a way we have the time, and in another way it's what is keeping us all sane. So
Right,
uh,
right, absolutely.
so what so I mean, speaking of which, and you being such a big Star Wars fan, what is your favorite Star Wars film?
Empire Strikes Back easily.
All right.
That's that might even be my favorite movie of all time. Not only just my favorite Star Wars movie or favorite John Williams score, because I mean that was the one that I mean that started it all for me as a kid. I mean, you know, that movie came out when I was 6, and you know my dad took my brother and I to see it. You know, just the the combination of the various elements of that film, like there's so much humor in it and drama in it, and it's, you know, one of the first ever like sort of trick ending movies with the reveal, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's true.
um, and the cinematography and the fact that, you know, Williams wrote no less than 6 totally original themes and music, you know, and score, like any
Absolutely.
one of those could carry a film, and he wrote like 6 of them, you know.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, music is very important to me in the film world because music is so visual for me, if that makes sense. You know, I mean, because when I was a kid, my dad would put on records and like explain the piece, the story of the music to me. So naturally, music became very visual for me. So that's why the score of a movie is very important to me. You know, and but I just love that film. You know, it's probably the movie I've seen the most in terms of number of times I've seen it. Um, but yeah, that would be my favorite
Yeah.
Star Wars movie easily. So
Well, well, look, man. Thanks for talking about you know your project and what you're doing to keep yourself sane, and hopefully it keeps the rest of us sane as well. And
yeah, well, did you want to talk a little bit about that video that went out and how I managed to pull that off?
yeah, actually, you know what? That's right. So the Star Wars video, which hopefully everyone's seen at this
Superman,
point.
Superman, you mean?
Yeah,
Right?
I'm sorry, Superman. When it was, you know, when it's put together, you've got, you know, you've got Chad Winkler, Mark Houghton, Craig,
That's it.
and
Yeah,
then you're doing the other parts, right?
yeah.
So like,
Well, what kind of spurred that on was like, you know, I saw people putting out these videos of people recording their own parts and putting them all together, and they all, you know, doing struggling with this, and I was like, you know, I know how this stuff works, and I said, but as an experiment, let me see if I can get Chad up to speed, Mark up to speed, and Craig up to speed. Like I just need one of each, and I have this arrangement of Superman that we've played on Parks concerts of
right,
like that's originally for 4 trumpets, 1 horn, 1 tuba, 4 trombones, and I expanded it a little bit. Um, and I was like, so I had to get on Zoom calls with each of them and explain how to do this and how to set up their mics, where to record, and then, you know, take a video and put all that together. And that's how that whole thing worked. And, you know, let me tell you, it takes some serious editing, mastering magic to make 4 different acoustics all sound like they happened in the same place. And so what I did was I started with that Superman recording I had that I've done and used that as sort of like a way for them to tune. Like they would have that in their ear with a click
right,
track, and then they send me the parts and I put them all together. And it was funny. I mean, like I feel for our audio engineers because everybody wanted their part louder. Everybody
oh
was
yeah,
like,
yeah, that
yeah.
yeah, that's
Oh, I
always
want my part louder. Yeah,
right,
I
right,
was like, if I make all your parts louder, nobody is louder than.
Right.
You realize that, right? You know,
everyone is special and nobody is special.
yeah. But it took a lot of doing, and then you know, this is what it looked like when I got all the parts together.
So was the video editing? I mean, it was clearly a new aspect for you, right?
Yeah, I had only done some video stuff over the years, and so I knew I could only handle about a couple of screens at a time.
Right.
But I jumped in and decided to use Final Cut Pro, which is an Apple program, but it has tremendous capability. Like you can do as many screens as you want.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's not cheap either. That's a really complicated program, actually.
well, but you know, the Apple has answered the call and of the desperation of everybody, and for 90 days, Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro, the two programs I use, are free for 90 days.
They'll catch everyone for 3 months, and then yeah.
But I mean, that's smart because you know people are desperate to do this stuff, you know, and so what ended up happening is here. I'll show you a screenshot of. So this is what it ended up looking like for those that want a little. So that's you know, they all did the videos in their separate locations, and I put them all together, and then it ends up looking like the software side of it is like this. So you see all the videos are stacked on each other, and then you know I have the sound in the bottom, and then it ends up looking like that, you know. And it took a lot of doing, but you know I'll give you a little preview for those that are interested in seeing the.
Yeah, I especially like the Superman curl that you have on your forehead.
That was Lindsay's idea.
Oh, I know it was. Don't worry. That's
yeah, and the opening and making it be that. I mean, because I feel like I'm in a Superman movie. You know, like this. COVID-19 is something Lex Luthor would create and release in the world to like take over the world, you know, and so that's why I had it themed that way. So those who see this are interested, just go to my YouTube channel and you can find that PSO. Although, boy, I just put it up yesterday, and I think last time I checked it was at 17,000 views.
Yeah, I mean, it's really gotten a lot of hits, you know, which I think is great. It just shows, you know, how people want to hear music, and especially good music right now.
Yeah, I mean, it took a ton of work to do, but it's a lot easier when you start with PSO caliber players. You know, like they give me a pretty awesome amount of raw material to work with. It's like it doesn't take a whole lot of you know. I mean, there's a lot of micro editing to kind of, because you know we weren't in the same room, so
right.
You know, there's nobody playing that you're matching. You know, you're just kind of doing your own thing and hoping you're shooting in the dark a little bit and hoping it lands where it needs to. And so, but now I have a whole different appreciation for what audio engineers have to do. I mean, it's one thing to do your own stuff. It's another thing to do other people's stuff. So
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, listen, I'll you know, thanks for chatting with me, Jim. And
sure, man.
You know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of this type of content, you know, as we continue to be isolated. So
yeah.
I have one last question before we go, though, and that is,
okay.
You know, gun to your head, if you absolutely had to make a choice, would you rather look like Jar Jar Binks or talk like Jar Jar Binks?
Oh, man, that's an impossible choice. You've been thinking about that for a while, haven't you? That's like choosing which eye I'd rather be stabbed in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, maybe some of the people that watch this will have a better answer.
Make it a poll. Yeah.
All right, Jim. Well, listen, you and Lindsay stay safe, and
yeah, you too, Jeremy.
Stay away from other people when you're running. That's what I'm
I know. It's more of a dodgeball course now than a running course, you know.
All right, well, we'll definitely get together for some drinks in person when this is over.
For sure.
All right. See you, Jim. Bye-bye.
Okay. See you, Jeremy.